Hey folks, welcome to the Rain channel. Patrick Francie here, and today I am joined by an old friend and real estate expert. I can spit that out. Mark Vasilius with HOS, Homeowners Soon, one of the principles of that business, which is a rent-to-own business. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Patrick, it's always a pleasure, and I think the last time I'm always reminded of the last time we physically met. You were pushing my motorcycle, but I won't tell that story. I just won't go there. I came close. I was just saying before we went on, I came close to visiting you. I made it to Vernon, but as I mentioned, my son had a job in Calgary that he had to get back to, which is probably going to be part of our conversations. Is I'm from Ontario, you're from BC. What the hell's going on in Canada, kind of thing, right?
Well, exactly. What the heck is going on in real estate in Canada? It's interesting. I just got back from Alberta. Of course, I was born and raised in Edmonton. They still call me Mr. Alberta because I keep directing people there, especially in the real estate world. But Mark, when you look at what's going on in the real estate world, you and I have had these conversations in the past. We haven't connected for a while, so this is a pretty fresh conversation. We don't know where we're going with it. But I would like to get your view. You've played the real estate game for a long time in all aspects, many tactics, many strategies. Rent to own right now, which, by the way, I think is absolute crushing it in terms of a strategy, if that's the game you want to play. But tell me what you see in the market. Interest rates are rising, supply, demand. It's kind of messy out there. How do you see it?
Well, it's like where do we start? Because Patrick, you and I probably since 2005, right? We've known each other. And I can honestly say we've had a pretty even bull run all the way, right even through COVID. And this is the first time in my 20 years that I'm pausing. I actually telling my wife this morning, I said, I've never experienced this kind of market. I believe we are, to be clear, I think we're at the top end of a very, very, very long cycle. And that was cheap money. Sure, we had some dips, but we've never seen these interest rates. We've never seen the supply demand things we're at. So I don't want to use the word that I'm scared, but I am definitely pausing and moving slower. Maybe that's the best way to look at it. I'm double checking all my numbers. I'm looking at things. I am still a cash flow pig. I love to see cash flow. And as you mentioned, there's not a lot of cash flow out there right now. I know in Ontario it's impossible. I have been looking at some property in Calgary. I think Calgary's on fire right now. And I do think there is still opportunities for cash flow. But as we mentioned before, Patrick, when I first got into this, I was seeing 10, 12% cap rates. I'll be lucky, even in Calgary, to get 6, 7, maybe 5 if you find an old sort of, and you fix her up. So, we're still, the only thing I want to say that I can say with confidence, I think we're at the top of something. Could it go higher? I don't know. I want to ask you that. Do you think we're going to see any more solid appreciation the way we've seen in the past 10 years?
Well, I think that's a great question, by the way. And I think we have to break it down and, go back to, in terms of how we view the world and share with listeners. First off, I want to go back to Homeowners Soon, HOS, as a rent-to-own strategy. I still think is a great strategy for a number of reasons, not the least of which people don't have down payments. They don't qualify for mortgages, but they still want to live in homes. At the end of the day, we're seeing higher income families that are struggling to own a home. So what are they doing? They're having to either rent or this is an option for them. And I'm talking about household incomes that are north of $150,000, even $200,000, and for a number of reasons, they don't qualify for a mortgage. They don't have that down payment. They're afraid of getting in the market. A rent-to-own strategy is very, very good. By the way, that's just how that would be my kind of comment on that. And I think you're nailing it there. In terms of cautiousness, I think the thing that we have to consider, Mark, is that this, to me, before all boats are rising on a high tide. And all boats, I mean nationally, it just seemed everything was going up at different levels, but it was all rising on that high tide. Now the tide has gone out or is starting to go out. It's going out differently in different ports. It's all to say that it's very regional. And you mentioned Calgary. We can look at Alberta as a province, talk a little bit about that. But ultimately, as we go right across the country, we're seeing the regionality become more apparent. So to your point, I think caution is definitely what we have to be. But I still go back to a fundamental, Mark. You and I have been on this planet a long time, and we both know that in amongst the confusion and the uncertainty, we could even call it chaos, is we can step back from it, but it doesn't mean get off the playing field. It just means time it or pay attention to where you're entering the field so that you're still playing the game. Because I think in all of this is where there's a lot of great opportunities. And I think there's more to come as the waters get a little choppier, so to speak. So that's kind of my high level view of it. I'm not looking through rose colored glasses at any of it, but
Yeah.
I think there's some real opportunity here.
Well, we both understand, the real estate cycles, and upon every moment or every point, there's opportunities. And as we said in the beginning, we're at, I think, a top end of something. Is it going to crash? I want to maybe talk about that. I'm not a doom and gloom guy, because I do want to look at facts. I want to look strongly at our demand issue. We have never had 900,000 people come into Canada. We have never had the demand that we've had. So we have, demand pushing prices up, but then of course we have interest rates and, the overall income pushing prices down. So it's almost like you got one going up, one going down. So where does that land? Because as you know, in real estate, one of the four legs of making money is appreciation. And and that's where I'm going back now to, if all we can go on is cash flow, then to your point, it is the rent to own. And I've gone heavily into that. I've sold some of my more, I just recently, as recent as August, sold a couple of big, heavy properties. I'm glad I did that. And I actually ended up getting into about 4 more rent to own properties where I'm seeing probably a 12% return on my net investment. Now, will the price appreciate? And as you and I both know, as long as I'm getting 12%, that's the minimum I'm going to be getting. Now, the only thing I can say is will those prices drop? And I'm not in the GTA, just to be clear. I'm in the outskirts where I'm seeing, I think what I call reasonable home prices, 400,000, 500,000. In Toronto, when I look at these million plus homes, I get scared. Maybe because I got this gray hair, Patrick. I know in Vancouver, out your way, it's very similar, that some of these prices, I don't know how the hell these guys can afford this stuff.
Well, you do wonder. But having said that, I don't know, Mark, when you look at, again, $1 million homes and all the things that are happening, that we see the headlines about, I look at it and say, okay, yes, it's a serious issue for those who want to be a first time home buyer or even a next time home buyer. But as an investor, I'm looking at it through a different lens. I'm looking at it saying, okay, where are the areas that I see an economic future? Where do I see what drives real estate? Because the headlines will drive emotionality. And I don't disagree with you that it is a little bit frightening sometimes when you start to see what's going on, especially if you're paying attention to what's going on a global macro kind of level, right? We don't know what Russia, China, Ukraine, UK, Europe. I mean, it's just a cluster screw there. And so that can have some really profound effects. We've got interest rates that are high, and we got a messed up government. Let's face it, you're in a boom market a couple of years ago, driven by emotion. Everybody's a real estate genius. Then the music stops.
That's right.
And
nobody can go wrong when prices are going up.
Everybody's a genius, right?
That's right.
I think there's a couple things. Is there going to be a bursting bubble or deflating bubble, or are real estate prices going to come off, 70%, 40%? That's a tough question. I look at what's happening right now and you say, okay, well, compared to what? When you look at the charts that are happening right now, and we consider that Toronto and Vancouver are the big markets, but let's talk about Toronto. They've come back off of the highs of 22, 21, 22, but they're not below 2019. I don't even think they're below 2020.
Right, which is not that bad. Which is, when you consider how far. Like I was just saying last night, you got $1 million home, and they said, oh, prices came down, and they literally said 4.3%. So I said, on $1 million, is that going to hurt any? That's 40 grand tops.
But Mark, let's talk about that a little bit. It only hurts if you have to sell. It only hurts if you bought without a strategy. It only hurts if you don't have cash flow, or it only hurts if you took a variable open and you kind of rolled the dice on it, and you got caught. Now, in behind all that, of course, we can talk about Tiff Macklem looking straight into the camera, going, we're going to have low interest rates for a very long time,
Right.
2023, and here we are, 2023, with triple what those rates were,
Right.
or quadruple what they are. Okay, we make these decisions as investors, or we make these decisions as home buyers, but when you got the freaking Bank of Canada looking at you, going, "No worries, go spend. We're not raising rates." Okay, well, that's kind of permission to go spend
Yeah.
and go take on more debt. So I look at what's happening. I think that then we look at regionality. Then we have to look at property type. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's 160,000 condo units Canada-wide coming onto the market right now. It's a huge spike. And most of those condo units, of course, are going to be in Toronto. They're going to be in Vancouver. It's where really the epicenter of that kind of home. So that when you look at the property type, you have to consider that some investors, I don't call them investors, I call them speculators, because they were buying to assign, they were buying to flip. They never intended to get a mortgage, and now they're caught. That is, that's a life lesson as far as I'm concerned. As we often say, don't speculate in that market. Have a plan A, have a plan B, even a plan C. And that's kind of what we teach. But having said all that, when we look at the supply and demand, you're right. It was actually over 1 million people came into this country. And right now, even if they cut that in half, if they cut it by 2/3, we still don't have the supply we need in that detached family home to accommodate. So in other words, when we look at our price is going to drop, we have to look at property type and we have to look at region for sure, in order to kind of create a thesis for ourselves in terms of investment. So I know that's a long answer to a kind of a short comment on your part, but that's kind of where I go.
And you mentioned something that I want to touch on. As investors, we're both investors and looking at strategies. I just, as I said, sold something, and because of, and I'll use the word political things happening, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I for the first time in my life, I actually bought out of country. I've looked at the US. So I looked at Costa Rica. I spent some time in Costa Rica. Now, the little that I know of real estate, the cost to build per square foot versus your income, I bought a townhouse in Tamarindo, paid $200,000. Now I could not get a mortgage, so I spent $200,000, but I'm getting $4,000 a month in rent every single month. You do the math on that, I'm going to get that's a significant cash flow. So from a strategy standpoint, I would say let's invest in Costa Rica. I'm not trying in any way to promote Costa Rica, because I know there's a lot of guys, but Canada, as we just discussed, there's so much things that I'm not quite comfortable with that I decided, I'll move a little bit of money out of country, see what happens there. We can talk about the US dollar. Of course, I had to buy in US dollar. That 200 was really about 350, but I'm also getting paid in US dollars. So that's a strategy that I decided to enter into. And, I'm sure, Patrick, you and I have discussed looking at the US. I'm seeing a lot of people I respect actually going into the US now, because where is the cash flow? Yes, I'm doing rent to owns. I want to promote that, but I'm also an investor like you, saying where's a safe haven? I think Costa Rica has got a lot of legs. I don't know if you've been there, but I ended up putting a bit of money there. It was the only challenge I had was moving the money. We got in the US, we could talk about taxes, and a lot of people get scared about owning a property. I certainly was. I like buying within an hour of where I live. I was scared. I did it. It wasn't that bad. I'm now seeing money coming in. I'm going, maybe I'll buy another one. So is it a strategy? I think it is. Remember when we were doing our thing, Patrick, we were talking about Belize. We were talking about other places to look at. So the global part of what you commented on is it's not just Canada experiencing this. It's the globe. And I think that moving money into different areas, the only thing I know is real estate. So I'm going to move, and I am looking at some place in Arizona right now. So yes, I am looking at diversifying the Canada regional part, because I am not sure of where we're going to go with that.
Well, I think there's, you make some great points in terms of whether Costa Rica, whether it's in the US, but US is the same. Where in the US, you have to look regionally. U.S. is a big country, and as is Canada. So when we look at and talk about Canada, again, we consider regionality. Is there jobs? Is there positive GDP? Is there population growth? And if you got the answer is yes to at least three of those three things, then you can start to really consider how to dig into what is next. So my point of this around is the regionality is I often will say that, as investors, we want to make our money work harder for us than we work for our money. And we want to be looking into the future of where real estate is going, not where it is or not where it's been. Back to your original point about, people who bought at the peak, now it's down 25%, 4.5% on $1 million, all those kinds of stories. It only matters based on what your exit is. If I bought a home and I paid top dollar for it in 2000 or 2021 or 2022, did I buy that home to get rid of it in a year or two?
Right.
No, I bought it for the long term. And so I ultimately have to be, it doesn't feel good, but ultimately it is what it is. And if I look 10 years into the future for how long I might own that home, or 20 years, hey, listen, we're not trying to time the market. It's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And whether you're a homeowner or an investor, I think we get caught in the emotion of, oh my gosh, I paid, $1 million, now it's worth 820,000. Okay, got it. And then in 3 years from now, it could be worth 1.3. So we have to consider a lot of things in that, and it's the emotionality. So I go back to the data. So right now, JG, one of my co-hosts, often jokes with me about being Mr. Alberta, as do many. And we started hammering our community, look at Alberta, look at Alberta. I mean, we've been doing that for years, but really turned up the heat in 2019 because we could see what was coming. Now, COVID put that on steroids. Yeah. And what's interesting about this, Mark, and your son I know works there, and he got a great job and being paid well, cool. But why did he move there? First off, he got a great job. He's paid well. Affordability, lifestyle. Yes, it gets cold, but lifestyle is pretty good when you've got extra cash in your jeans and you're working and you're not paying, HST, and your income is higher than when you left Ontario, because that's normally what happens in Alberta. The thing about it is, I don't know if you know this, but oil production out of Alberta is down to back in about 2016, 2017 levels. Now, if you're in Alberta in 2016, 2017, you're an investor, you were hating life. You couldn't get rents, you couldn't get cash flow, or it was really hard. Prices were flat, nothing was happening because oil industry was quiet. Yet today, here we are, same numbers, 2016 to 2017, and Alberta's doing well. No threats of layoffs. And here's what's important to know about Alberta is the economy is diversified enough. It's got great leadership in terms of Danielle Smith, and I get that's politically charged. I think there's a couple of stories. Most cities in Alberta, Mark, are pretty strong. I still am cautious about Grand Prairie. I owned many, many doors in Grand Prairie. I sold out to my partner a couple of 3 years ago. Having said that, I still own real estate in Edmonton and in British Columbia, and multifamily, light industrial, single family, detached, duplex, that kind of stuff. My point is this. I look at Calgary and I look at Edmonton, and this is where it's going to be the test of time. Rural is absolutely, don't even bring up the topic. It's like that charged, right? I think we both agree that this is a pretty politically charged time. I think it's going to be the tale of two tapes. What is Edmonton going to do compared to Calgary, for example? And politically, that had what the economic development of a city, what their budgets are, how they spend their money is going to really dictate that. And Edmonton is kind of not catching up to Calgary like it normally would. And so only time will tell. But, we have to look at these influencers, if you will. COVID was an influencer. Interest rates are an influencer. Interest rates aren't going to stay this high forever. Will they stay this way for a couple of years? Yeah, I think so.
Patrick,
what's your thoughts? Go ahead, Mark. Sorry, didn't interrupt.
Well, you touched on a lot of things. I just wanted to comment a little bit on, why you buying it and what's your exit. So you and I want to dare say we're kind of similar in age. And so our strategy, our plan for investing is probably different than I would look at. And to your point, if I was investing, I would absolutely look at the fundamentals and which we everyone should do, which is the cost of the home versus what the rents are. That equation, that ratio, well, in your head, after a while, you get to figure out if you're going to make money. I'm looking with my son right now at a brand new build, 450 for a 3-bed townhouse, and they will build in a nanny suite. I did the numbers, I did the rents, and I said, oh my God, I'm going to make 8% on a brand new build in Calgary. So am I going to buy that? I'm looking at buying in Calgary because I can't get that in Ontario. So from a strategy standpoint, you're right. I mean, I'm looking at a different thing. I'm also looking at my son. I'm trying to teach my son. He's just 23. Now, on that, I want to say Ontario is losing more people than they're getting in. Where are they going? They're going to Alberta. I mean, the true story is his motorcycle broke down in Calgary. I looked across the street, a company called Techmation. I said, go in there. Quiet. Dad, I don't want to do it. He walks in. He hire him on the spot. We were supposed to go out to see your neck of the woods. We couldn't make it because can you start in a week? So he's been there ever since, and he's ready to buy a home. So just for anyone out there that's interested in investing, he's 23, man. He's just bought a truck. I'm going to help him get into a rental property, which is he's going to live in one unit. Do that, Patrick. You know that strategy. He's in that space. My other son is he's getting married as well, which is a great thing. He's going to, we just bought a piece of land and we're going to build him a duplex because I said to begin your life, you rent a portion, get them to pay your mortgage so you can survive. So I think those are very practical strategies. And Patrick, when I was married, when I had kids, I had a renter in the basement, ask my kids, so that they got used to it. But what happened? My mortgage was next to nothing. So I want to say, if we're in such difficult times, let's look at real ways we can still make money in real estate. And that is renting out your basement. I know that's like, oh, come on. No, it's a reality. And if you're a first-time home buyer, I'm encouraging, I just told you, I'm heavily into the rent to own thing because that's where the cash flow is important to me. Yeah. These guys, I'm saying, you want to rent out your basement to help you pay me, do it. I'm encouraging that. So we got to buckle down and get tough and look at the strategies to make money with real estate. You're right. The economy is sort of always going to be hovering around, whether it's Alberta. What can we practically do today to keep our foot in that door? Because I do think real estate is one of the best things to make money with. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. And like I say, right now we're in this weird time. It is frightening, and especially if you are that individual that pays any attention at all to mainstream media. I don't, by the way. But even when you get in looking at the research that I look at, the data that I look at, and follow some of the experts, it's hard not to be doom and gloom. It really is hard to be doom and gloom if you're a realtor that's trying to figure out how to get a deal done or find a deal or get a listing or sell a listing. If you're a mortgage broker trying to get somebody a mortgage, I just read a stat today, Mark, which is really interesting, is that 1 in 5, or is it 1 in 5, maybe even more, mortgages have gone into negative amortization. So in other words, the bank is kicking the can down the road because of the affordability of mortgages. And, somebody who started out with a 25-year amortization, a couple of examples they gave, one is at 35 years, one is at 47 years amortization, and literally paying $26 a month against the principal. So
let's talk a little bit about that, which is a reality. That is a huge reality. These renewals are coming. Let's talk realistically. Do you really think the banks are going to want to take over? No. So they're going to create terms and conditions on these renewals so that you can keep your home. So although there is the doom and gloom of, oh my God, my rents are going, my mortgage payments going up, the banks are recognizing, oh my God, we could have a tidal wave. Let's maybe do a 40-year AM. So to your point again is, well, what if you go with a 40-year AM until you get through this? At least you have stable family life, because we're talking about regular people, regular families trying to make it. I do not see the banks going into the foreclosure business. So they are going to create whatever it takes for people to keep their homes. So that's going to mitigate the what you're talking about. Another thing I want to talk about, which I just read yesterday, posted on LinkedIn, is what CMHC is saying. Unbelievably,
go ahead. It's a
Did
big
you
one.
see that where they're saying in
Yes.
2030, on the low side, we're going to see a 74% increase in property values.
Yeah.
So what the heck? Where do we go with that one? How do we unpack that one?
Well, and a 3.5 to 4 million shortage of units.
Yeah, 4 million. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting about it. I'll give you my view of that, just because, first off, when you look at the people that we think we should trust. Okay, Stats Canada, gosh, government, we should trust them. They should know what the hell they're doing. They missed the mark. They missed the head count by 1 million people. Oh, non-permanent. Oh, sorry. Somebody must have erased that number along the way. We missed that. Oh, gee, sorry. So my trust level's gone down. CMHC, we have to look at their track record. Okay, so they're going to increase. Prices are going to increase by 75 or whatever the number is, 80% almost. The point is, and then 4 million shortage, and you go, come on, CMHC. I don't really trust your analysts. You got 400 whatever on staff, and we pay them all.
Right.
And I can get really kind of cynical about these agencies.
For sure.
Having said that, even if they're only half right, okay, even if they're
Which
only
is
half
probably
right,
the reality. Yeah.
you're going, okay, could they screw up more than 50%? Probably, but let's say they're only 25% right, and the rest is all bullshit.
Right.
That still presents huge opportunity for us as real estate investors. And in spite of the rhetoric and the outside views of the world and who we are, to where we sit in the world of the G7 or the G20 or whatever G they want to put in front of it, I always look at these numbers and I go, who gives a shit? Seriously, why are we comparing ourselves to Switzerland? Different economy, different culture, different government, different everything. Why are we comparing ourselves to Germany or Japan, for Christ's sakes? It makes for great headlines. The government likes to go, we're the best in the G20. I go, okay, well, really, who cares? I'm living here. That's all I care about. And you guys are making a mess.
There is one stat, and I think I might have sent you the report that Scotiabank did 3 years ago, where they said compared to the per capita households per capita in the G7, Canada is at the bottom. In other words, homes per people, the gross people, we are at the bottom. And this was 2 years ago, even more actually, where it said, so comparing to the G7, which we would call developed countries, Canada is the worst at supplying homes. And that was before we realized we were bringing in immigration. So that number, they put a number to it. This was a Scotiabank, not CMHC. They put a number 3 years ago that we were 600,000 homes short just in Ontario and 1.4 million in all of Canada. You just said at the beginning of the show, CMHC is now saying we're 3 million. So you're right. Just take half of that. Let's keep it with 1.5 million short. There's still a massive demand pushing up on new homes. So 100%. Is it, I'm still investing, just to be clear. I just closed on 3 properties last month because of the cash flow. Yes, I'm worried about it, but I'm putting my money where I don't see prices crashing. I see prices kind of doing this a little bit down and whatever, because the banks are in the business for us to keep our homes. That's why I'm doing it.
I agree, Mark. And I think we can't overstep one fundamental, right? Which is everything seems to be going up, but it's really about the value of money. So as much as we think, prices are going up, it's really about the value of money and monetary policy that's created this mess, right? And so it's a bit of an illusion as to what's really going on and what's crashing and what's not. Mark, we got to wind this down. We can talk about this.
We just started.
I know. We're just getting warmed up. I
wanted to talk a little bit about the $1 million price of 4.5 going down. We have inflation that went up 1 point. So guess what? We actually lost 100,000, but it only says 4. So that's another show, I guess.
All right, we're going to do another show. We're going to have to catch up and do this again. And I guess I'll leave with I'll let you give me your profound thoughts about this and what you would give investors some guidance around, and then I'll do the same to wrap the show.
Okay. So I would recommend we always look at the fundamentals, which is and you start with cash flow. If you cannot get cash flow, don't buy. Just don't buy. I got that drill. That has worked well for me from the very beginning. So if there's any investor out there, if you can't get cash flow from day one, do not buy that property, because We're not going to see appreciation. A lot of people, pre-construction type things, they're hoping prices go up. Don't build your portfolio on that. Build it on cash flow. That's my stuff.
Beautiful. I love it. And I would say that, as investors, I think there's a couple things. We often will say, surround yourself with like-minded people, get an education, and follow a system and a process. Of course, within the real estate investment network, that's what we do. But form your thesis and then execute against a plan. And, it's not about not playing the game. It's about playing the game smarter. And that means pausing, taking a look, fixing problems, because Mark, there's going to be a lot of opportunity if you are a problem solver, because there's a lot of problems coming our way for people who maybe got into trouble for any number of reasons. At any given time, there's deaths, there's divorces, there's transfers, there's layoffs, and those individuals can find themselves in hot water. And if you can be a solution for the problem that they have, you get to be a deal engineer and create some great, great opportunities. Mark, I love having conversations with you, and we'll do it again.
It's so amazing that after all these years, Patrick, the real estate network is still around, and I built my business on what I learned there. So I got to thank you guys for that, for sure.
Thanks,
Mark.
That. Okay, we'll catch up again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.